Coaches, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you for joining us. My name is Chaz Henry, and I am the founder of PowerChalk.com. Today I'm talking about growing great athletes. And before I get on my soapbox, let me give you some perspective on my qualifications on this subject. First of all, I'm not an elite athlete. And unlike Bill Renner from last week, I've not coached players into the NFL or the MLB. But here's what I have done. I played high school baseball, and I've coached Little League for 12 years. I've coached hockey, I've coached basketball, I've coached middle school baseball, and I've thrown enough buckets of balls to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. And with the advent of PowerChalk, I've worked with the coaching staffs of the Reds and Dodgers. I've watched probably 2,000 hours of slow-motion video, working with hundreds of professional coaches. So my original coaching philosophy, in much of my coaching experience, I've had a very simple equation. I tried to transfer my enthusiasm for the game. I really felt like that was my main goal, and that was my job. And especially, at the T-ball level, when these kids are very small, I really wanted them to appreciate the game of baseball and, again, some of the other sports that I played. And I tried to give very good practices. I tried to have a very well-structured practice and maximize the reps. If you'll go out on the getbetterfaster.tv, you'll see one of my other webinars on running a good practice. So I really believe you got to have stations, you got to keep the kids moving, you got to keep them doing. So the third thing I did is I charted one thing. And I'll be honest with you, very early in my career, I charted all kinds of things, shots and, in the basketball world, and it got down to charting one thing, and that's playing time. I believe this is all developmental, and I believe kids come to play and you learn by doing. So that's a whole nother discussion. But that was my philosophy. So not a terrible approach. Like I said, much of my experience was with very young kids. But here's what I learned. I didn't, until very late in my coaching career, understand the importance of and properly teaching mechanics and fundamentals. So in my humble opinion, here's what I've come to believe. If you're coaching middle, youth, high school, college, you should be spending almost all of your time teaching mechanics and fundamentals. And the reason I say that is I have seen fundamentals, or the lack thereof, become a limit, become a huge ceiling for someone's game and someone's ultimate achievement. So now I came to understand this first with my own game. I was a self-taught golfer, and at one point I was playing maybe 3 times a week. And during that stretch, I went to the Nick Faldo School in Orlando, and I had my swing analyzed. And I found out for the first time, very graphically, very visually, through video, that I had grooved a bad swing. So long story longer, but here's my takeaway. You've got to coach fundamentals. Now, I'll enlist the help of a couple star athletes to help me make that point. Kobe basically said, I can't jump like I used to. I'm not as fast as I used to, but I still have fundamentals and smarts. And skip to the bottom there, athleticism is fleeting. For some of us, athleticism was never there. I mean, we just worked hard and we kind of overcame. And I certainly don't put myself in the category of Larry Bird, but Larry Bird would be a great example of just really working on fundamentals. Now, by the way, this pitch, if you will, doesn't just apply to sports. Nico Hamilton said you can't extend or go beyond any point musically without basic fundamentals. I actually saw Ian Anderson, the lead singer and flute player for Jethro Tull, say the exact same thing. He was a self-taught flute player, and he said, I got to a point where I believe some of the little quirks, some of the things that I did wrong were actually advantages, and I got to where I couldn't play certain things because I did not have good fundamentals. He had to go back and relearn. Jim Palmer said, I hated fundamentals. Been doing them since '64. And I hated spring training. One thing that I've come to know, and part of what's led me to this belief system, is I've worked with Bill Renters, I've worked with these professional teams, and I see athletes who are the top, the very top of their field, doing nothing but fundamentals, and nothing but basic exercises that ingrain or deepen those fundamentals. So in a way, this pitch, this presentation is almost a book report. And some of what has really, again, reinforced this belief is a book called The Talent Code. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And it's by Daniel Coyle. And he talks a lot, and I won't go into the deep side of myelination, but he talks about myelination. And myelination, when you learn a new skill, when you do something that you've never done before, you develop a new neural pathway. And these pathways are actually coded over time. The more you do that thing, the more it puts what's called a myelin sheath around that. And think of the skill itself as a wire, and think of the sheath as coating or as insulation. And what happens is the more you do that, and the more coating you get, the faster that circuit becomes. It also becomes more likely to be the chosen circuit, because what happens is when you're doing when you're doing a certain exercise, or if you're handed the ball and you're put in a situation where you've got to do something fast, your brain is going to take the path, the neural pathway that it's most comfortable taking. So what happens is this coding builds up the more you repeat something. And we all know, typically you're going to have someone talk about that as muscle memory. We all know there's no memory in our muscles. The memory is in our brain, but it's controlling the muscle. But that's exactly what this is. This is a skill. This is an ability that is coded with a myelin sheath, and it builds up speed the more you use it. So what Daniel Coyle talks about is deep practice. And he basically says, and I've read this in other books, that you learn on the edge of your ability. And one of the things I always tried to do in hockey, I tried to, if my kids could lean 10 degrees around this cone, I tried to put the cones in an arrangement where they'd have to lean 15. They had to push and they had to get out on that edge. One of the things I learned in hockey is if they're not falling, they're not creating new skills, because they're well within the boundaries of their abilities. So I put this over here, I put this graphic over here, and to me this was the epitome of what not to do. You'll see in an open skate, you'll see kids skating around using this little device here, this red device, and what that's doing is that's keeping them from building that neural pathway. So if you want to use this as a graphic and kind of take this to your, to your own practices and to your own coaching, then I highly recommend this as what not to do. So this little guy right here, or this gal, is skating around and using this as a crutch. And what they should be doing is skating around and creating a new neural pathway that says if you lean too far this way, down you go. And if you lean too far this way, down you go. And it's through that constant making of mistakes, leaning a little bit too far, and constantly slowing down to the speed of success. Bring it back to what you can do and keep going. Correct errors, rinse and repeat. So again, obviously you want to pad these little guys up in the hockey world, and they are. They're padded 10 ways to Sunday. And you want to have them skate around and create these pathways in their brain. And that's exactly what's happening when you're operating on the edge of your ability. So another thing we'll talk about in deep pathways is chunking. So he talks about, Daniel Coyle talks about chunking. And chunking is grouping together, basically, if I can put it in just layman's terms, it's stacking the bricks. It's building on top of small skills. And I'll give you a good example, and this is actually an example he uses in the book. There was a study in California where somebody noticed, and I noticed this with my nephew many, many years ago. We were riding along, and he was just barely over 2 years old, really just talking, and he was reading all the signs. He was saying Subway, Burger King, KFC, McDonald's. And I noticed what some folks in California noticed, which is these guys can read words. These little kids can read words. So why are we not accelerating them through the process of reading by teaching them whole words? And I'll give you an example. When you look at the word baseball, all of us just instantly see the entire word. So we see baseball. And, you know, with that ability, you would think, well, I can learn hundreds and hundreds of words and get a real jump start on reading. What happens is, what we're really seeing is we first see syllables. We see the word base and we see the word ball. And this is especially true with words we've not seen before. So we look for syllables, and those are chunks. So the syllables are chunks, and if it's a syllable we've never seen before, we start looking at letters, and we build the syllable from the letter. So fast forward, if you will, to baseball skills, to punting skills, to soccer skills, to almost any sports skill, and what you realize is I don't have the chunks. If I can't read letters, I can't make syllables. And if I can't make syllables, I can't make words. So again, looking back on what I've seen in my own career is too much of my time was spent teaching entire skills. Too much of my time was spent, like I said in that second slide, throwing buckets of balls to kids who didn't have good mechanics. And, you know, I had the belief, and I'd actually read this at times, that if you do something thousands and thousands of times, that your body will figure out the optimal way. And I think to a small degree that's true, but I also think there are things that are absolutely not true. It is not intuitive to keep your bat, and I'll grab my marker here. It is not intuitive to keep your bat right next to your shoulder as you swing. I mean, if I'm swinging this bat at a ball, I cast the bat. I take that bat to the ball immediately. I don't pull the bat through with this hip. That's not intuitive. So some of what kids develop in running, in certain things, they develop an absolute natural, optimal way to do things, and in some, they absolutely don't. There is nothing intuitive about some of these optimal sports motions. So with that, and this is one of my favorite quotes in all of my coaching, I had a coach come to me and say that, you know, he was glad to be in a competitive league and out of the developmental leagues. So that's one of my questions to you, coaches, is do you coach developmental or competitive? And it's a trick question because, again, in my humble opinion, we're all in developmental. Unless you're coaching pros, and I think for a lot of us, even if you're coaching pros, you're in a developmental league. I mean, you've got to be coaching mechanics all the way through the process. So I'm going to jump into Telestrator and give you an example. I've got Ramirez from the Brewers, and I'm going to switch over to the Chalk Talk Telestrator. And what I've done, and this is an example for me of, you know, what I would say is fundamentals, and I've gone through and I've taken his swing and I've marked stance, load, plant, weight shift. I've marked the template that we have provided as a swing template, and I can just quickly jump to stance. Now here's one of the things I always encounter is what is optimal. And you've got Tim Lincecum and you've got Cliff Lee. You know, which are the optimal pitching mechanics? And I think one of the things I would say to you is find the person you want to model. Find the person at a pro level or at a very high level. If you're playing lacrosse and your son is 12, look at a 16-year-old. Look at the best 16-year-old on your screen or on your team and start to model those mechanics. Start to learn from what's good. Now I can jump to load. Now I personally like this load, and I'm not going to get into talking baseball mechanics. My point here really is that what we're doing here is we're breaking this swing down. We're breaking it down into pieces that my kids can practice independent. So what I might want to do with my kids is I might want to make an entire day out of just getting to a good load position, you know, getting my hands, and again, you'll give them some visual, you know, getting my hands to a certain position, you know, relative to my shoulder or my ear, and getting my weight completely on my backside, which is, again, a fundamental for being loaded. I mean, what you'll see for a lot of kids in baseball, they don't really get loaded. So again, depending on what your optimal load is, one of the things is getting your weight to your backside. Clearly, Ramirez has done that here, evidenced by the fact that his back foot is on the ground and his front foot is not. So he's got to be loaded. He's got to be on the backside right there. Now we'll jump to plant. And one of the things that we typically draw here is, let me erase this, and I will throw one thing down again just to give you, a very specific. I'll jump back to here. There's a linear movement in baseball. If I mark his head and I take him through all the way to the point that he plants, and I'll stop him when he plants. There's the plant. And there's the point at which the heel goes down. And at that point, there's no more linear motion. If I track him, obviously there's been linear motion from here to here. He's gone linearly through the box. But if you notice, from there to the point that he contacts the ball, there's no more linear motion. These are the kind of things, these are the fundamentals that I think by throwing buckets of baseballs to kids who aren't practicing that particular fundamental. Now we could break this into 11 pieces. There's 11 steps here, and we could talk about what's absolutely crucial at all 11 steps. But my point to you, because that's not what we're doing today, we're really just trying to establish, the idea that this is all about fundamentals. And my point is, by throwing buckets of baseballs to kids who are not practicing that particular fundamental, then I'm helping them groove a bad swing. And again, I probably got onto this maybe in the last 3 years of my coaching, so I have serious regret, about how many years I threw baseballs to kids and let them swing however they wanted. And, as we all do, we get focused on results. When they whack one, we say, great swing, great job. And it's no different than me driving one down the middle with my bad golf swing. It absolutely does not equate to a good swing. I would stripe one every now and then, just like all of us do, and that's what, in the game of golf, keeps you coming back. So with that, let me go back to our slides here and talk about one other example. My son right now is playing middle school soccer. And, he's had an issue where he gets the ball and he's driving through the field. And let's say he's coming up to center here. Let me change my color to yellow. So he's got the ball and he's driving up the field and he meets a defender right here. Part of what's happening for all of these kids is he's got so many skills and he's got really good ball skills that he's not sure which one he's going to do. So what we did, we picked one out and we basically said it's no different than in basketball, meeting the defender here and needing to do a crossover dribble. Let's focus on one move and let's get that one move perfect. So I asked him to show me all of his moves, and what I thought was his best move, he does a little thing where he takes his foot and goes around the ball without touching it, and it's kind of his hesitation move. And that creates the opportunity to then touch it with his right foot, it would be the outside foot, and send the ball to the right, over to here, or touch it after he's made the circle around the ball with the inside of his foot and send the ball to here. And in both cases, what he's doing is creating space. If the defender freezes, if he can freeze them at that moment, he creates space, and he can now either take a left-footed shot or he can take a right-footed shot on goal. So we worked on that for 2 weeks, and we worked on nothing but that. And, my point to him was you don't need to have 10 moves. You need to have one move that you do really well. And we videoed the move, and we talked about the kick execution of it, the execution of the, what I'll call the crossover, the fake and go. We absolutely worked on that exclusively. And I got to tell you, coaches, what happened this week in the tournament, so we're now at tournament time, he came down and had this exact situation. And he circled the ball with his foot, he pushed it out to the right, and he put it on goal and hit the post. So huge step forward in his game, because this is now his go-to shot. Now, he'll need to add multiple shots, but again, just like the crossover dribble, Even if he just uses this exclusively, you still don't know if he's going to go left or go right. If he executes it well, he's going to create space and get a shot. So that's really, for me, an example of deep practice. We did this, by the way, dead slow. So as we practiced, we studied the steps. We really mapped it out. We talked through it. And that, to me, is one of the things. If your player can tell you why, you know, we're a how-to nation. We're all about how to. I mean, I know how to get in shape. The real issue is why to. I mean, we should be a why to nation. If you give me the reason to do something, if you schedule, you know, a match for me a month from now, I'm going to get in shape working toward that match. I'll do the hows that I know how to do better because I now have a why. So you want to master each step. You want to explain each step to the player. And I would really emphasize here, you want the player to explain it back to you. We talked our way through every bit of these moves and said, now, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Once he understands, he buys in. And once he's focused on this move, he has no other moves. When he comes here, one of the huge, and this is in golf too, you pick a 7-iron, one of the big drawbacks, one of the parts of somebody's game, you know, that is the toughest, is they're not committed to that 7-iron. The whole time they're holding it, they think, you know, this may be further than it looks. And you want to commit to that, and you do that by really buying into the move that you're about to make. Like I said, you want to break it down into small steps, and then you want to chain those steps together. One of the things that Coyle talks about in his book, and one of the things they found, is that the more you struggle through these repetitions, the thicker and the faster the myelination occurs. So now, what do you mean by struggle? It means if I'm doing something that I know how to do, something that I can do easily, you know, if I'm juggling and I already know how to juggle, then I'm developing stamina, but I'm not developing new skills. I'm not myelinating that circuit. If you throw a fourth ball in, now I'm struggling. Now I'm laying down new insulation and I'm creating new skills. So how do you struggle? How do you create struggle? You do it dead slow. You do it real fast. You set the cones further apart. You have kids race. You know, one of the things I found in hockey is if I could take something they already knew how to do and I could have them race doing it, then that put them on the edge of their ability. That created a struggle and that created new capability. So you want to freeze frame, that should say freeze. You want to look at freeze frames. You want to compare, you know, as we did with Ramirez, we want to compare videos. If you've got a mirror, if this is a golf swing, if this is something that can be done with you looking at yourself, you want to stop and then see exactly what you look like. I was absolutely shocked when I saw my golf swing, you know, after working on a driving range for over a year on it. I was absolutely shocked at what I saw. It's not what I felt at all. You want to do these things result-free. You know, when my son and I kicked that ball, I had no interest in whether the ball went in. What we were looking at was a couple things. We were looking at perfecting this skill, but I was also trying to demonstrate to him just how far his range was. I mean, he really did not believe that his range, you know, extended all the way out to here. You know, he thought his range was only, now I'm a little bit out of scale here, he thought his range was only up here on the box. And it turns out his range was, you know, well out of the box, much out here. And we did that by, I said, I want you to kick on all of these, kick the ball into the woods, kick it way over the net. And he found out that his range was much further than he thought. So results are not an issue here. We're working on the skill. And the other thing I would really reinforce is that practice does not make perfect. Practice makes permanent. In my golf swing, it made a bad swing very permanent. It took me a lot of time to undo it. So, in summary, I highly recommend the talent code. Again, coaches, I'm really promoting, and obviously the answer is always in the middle, but you got to hear from the left, and you've got to hear from the right to find the middle. I really promote that you need to teach fundamentals and professional motion, perfect motion, excellent mechanics. If you don't know what excellent mechanics are, do a John. See yourself as John Wooden saw himself. See yourself as a teacher. Call yourself a teacher and not a coach. But at first means you've got to go learn the subject. You've got to immerse yourself in mechanics and apply deep practice. Again, I don't I don't pretend that this is a substitute for the book. You really need to grab the talent code. He also talks about ignition. He talks about master coaching. He talks about some great things that go hand in hand with deep practice. I've really just touched on one. But I believe you've got to learn, analyze, and teach pro motion. And that means video, that means slow-mo, that means show and tell. Show your athlete why keeping that elbow in, why leading with the hip, and why not casting your bat early creates more power. Have them pull a rope. Have them pull a rope and say, I want you to pull all with your hands, or I want you to pull using just your core. Just pull your hips and keep your hands steady. And have them feel which creates more power. So with that, let me open it up for questions. You've got a question pod in your control panel. Please type in questions. And we're at the we've got 4 minutes left, so let me take a couple questions. First question, Robert. Coach, how do you know what constitutes good mechanics? There are a lot of different batting and pitching styles. It's a good question. Let me go back over to Ramirez here, and you may be of the belief that, and this is kind of a Bryce Harper swing right here, you may be more of the Albert Pujols style, that you just go ahead and put that foot right there, and you just take the heel down. So I think the answer to your question, Robert, is there's more than one pro swing in the baseball world. There's many pitchers who do drop and drive, and there's even more now who do tall and fall. So I think that, and that's what I'm suggesting, is you really got to go to school yourself, and you've got to help your kids find what is the most natural motion for them. So I think first you identify the mechanics that you're trying to model, and then you start to work to replicate those. What I'm suggesting is that it's not intuitive, and you're not likely to find optimal mechanics by just hitting buckets of balls and developing your own swing. Success leaves clues. These guys are pros for a reason. So let me take one more question, Marcy. I often encounter dads who undermine my coaching by teaching different mechanics. Have you seen that? And if so, how do you handle it? I absolutely do. I mean, a lot of these dads, and by the way, I've had dads that I found out, a few games into the season played pro ball. So it's very humbling to be out teaching mechanics and find out that your pitcher, his dad pitched for the Cubs. So the answer is, and I think this is again part of the reason you formalize this process. The answer is you get everybody on the same page. The sunshine is the ultimate antiseptic, and if you involve the parent, if this were one of the models that we've chosen, and I put as my B video my player, and we start to go frame by frame, and we say, hey, at weight shift, what do we see? What's the difference? And we find out, what the dad believes. And obviously there's some politics there in bringing the dad toward your side, but you may, end up going, to them. So I think, my answer to that is viva la conversation. The conversation is what it's all about. And I don't think that's happening enough. I don't think there's enough kids playing youth sports who are having conversation about mechanics. So with that, I see a couple other questions. Let me say this. This session will be posted to getbetterfaster.tv. I record these sessions. I post them to the blog at Get Better Faster. You can also email me. I'm glad to respond directly to email at chaz@powerchalk.com. So with that, coaches, I hope I've provoked some thought in this session. These webinars are produced solely to foster that conversation that helps your kids get better faster. Like I said, you'll find this at getbetterfaster.tv. Up in the right-hand corner, there is a subscribe button. So please have your fellow players, coaches, and parents subscribe to this. Get them in that conversation. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Chaz Henry, and I'll see you next week.